Yo, I worked really hard on this video, so if you guys could like and comment down below, that would be greatly appreciated. First things first is the Berserker. The Berserker is your average warrior class when it comes to most MMOs. He yields a big ass sword and surprisingly has good mobility, also being considered one of the most top damage dealers. How to play this class? Berserker is a melee based class that requires you to build gauge to enter your fury mode, giving you access to 1 extra skill and crit damage plus crit chance buffs, also making you look cool as hell. Now to explain his builds. His first build is Berserker Kill It Move. This build requires you to build gauge, just like how I explained before. Once your gauge is at max, you have a long period of time to gush out a ton of damage. His other build, which is fairly new and that everyone has switched to, is the Madness build. You start with a permanent maximum gauge and always do insane damage at the risk of losing 75% of your HP. Now the benefit though, is that you also get a 65% damage reduction buff, as well as Madness buffs being much better, providing you with 18% damage increase. Also forgot to mention that both builds and gauge mode, you get a ton of movement speed and attack speed, making the Berserker feel very smooth rather than slow and clunky. So the Paladin is one of the 2 support classes in the NA launch. He wields a sword and deals holy damage basically. The class design is amazing and also feels great. Although you do 0 damage, the class feels like you are a DPS. Now what I mean by that is his playstyle must be met by attacking the boss to receive buffs for you and others. How to play this class? The Paladin is another class with the form of gauge. When you attack, your gauge bar fills up. When your bar is at max, you have 2 options. One, to buff your blue attack skills, which is horrible, don't ever do that. Or, another to use Healing Faith, giving your teammates around you healing and defense, which is really good. Now builds. His first build that 99% of people prioritize is his Healing Faith build, making him an amazing support. Now, giving a bunch of consistent attack bar buffs to your teammates as well as buffing yourself with shields. Now the other build is his DPS build, which I won't talk about a lot because it's god awful, sadly. Not going to say much, but you basically give yourself a ton of buffs, which isn't even enough to do decent damage. This class is by far the best class in the game, I'm just going to say it. It's overall the best class. He's a tank and is also an amazing DPS. He has a massive shield with a massive like sword or whatever you call this big ass thing. If you want to be a tank and never die as well as taunt the boss, this class is the right one for you. Now how to play this class? Warlord is a gauge class that builds up its own gauge over time. When gauge is enabled, you can either shield your whole team, which is rarely ever done, or you can shield yourself, making you immune to damage and knockback until your shield is depleted, which chances are will never be. Now builds, his first build, which is the blue build, is a slightly weaker spec for the build but tankier. His second build is a red build, which is slightly less tanky but stronger, so you can choose your path. Next up is Striker. Striker is a really cool design class. Think of it as Mortal Kombat, the karate guy that kicks people's asses left and right. His holographic tiger strikes when charging his main skill is super cool as well, basically his main damage skill. The design of this class really makes me want to main it. Now how to play this class? Striker is a back attack class, which requires you to attack the boss in the back for maximum damage. If not attacking in the back, you will do significantly less damage. His gauge is made up of orbs. When attacking, your orbs will fill up, then when at maximum orbs, you can do an insane amount of damage. Now for builds. His first build is the meta build. The special strike build allows you to have up to 4 orbs. Once those 4 orbs are full, you do an extra 35% damage per orb, making you a really strong burst class. His second build is a consistent damage build that is much faster due to stack and agility. Every time you use a gauge skill, it does not suck all orbs at the same time, but only one. Unfortunately, this build is not as strong and considered slightly weaker when it comes to the charts. I personally love this build better, so I don't mind losing out on damage. Wardancer. This class is the best party buff class in the game, in my opinion. Wardancer is a girl street fighter that has a ton of punching skills and kicking skills that are really fast. She does a lot of damage and is also really fun because it's considered a zoomer class, since it's very fast and has very low cooldowns. Now how to play? To play this class, you must self-buff yourself with 2 buffing skills, then burst out all of your damage skills in under 6 seconds. This can be considered very repetitive and some people tend to get bored of playing her due to this playstyle. Now her builds. Her first build, which used to be meta, is called Beginner's Mind. It initially involves her to completely remove her identity factor and just burst out skills after you self-buff yourself. Can be repetitive, but is a good and easier spec to play. Her second build is called 5 Strengthening, giving her gauge skill proper use. This build is super strong and you still have to buff yourself, but is less repetitive since you can mix different combinations. Both play alike but just have different skills. Scrapper. This class is also a straight up punching class. She literally has a skill where she repeatedly punches for like 3 seconds straight. Her skill design is not the flashiest, it's very simple actually. Now how to play her? Scrapper is another back attack class unfortunately. On the bright side though, you do have higher damage potential. To play her, you must balance both her yellow and green moves to never lose gauge. Now this isn't a problem at all because of how easy it is. it's not really something you have to focus on to manage. Her first build is her yellow build, giving her a bunch of agility, making her cooldown skills really short, and having fast attack skills, kinda like Wardancer. Her second build is her green build, which is much different, stacking specialty. Her skills are much slower to use and is a much harder spec to play. Both are very equal damage wise though, so it depends which skills you like more and which playstyle you like more. Next up is Soulfist. Soulfist is the anime class. What I mean by that is that her awakening skill is a literal spirit bomb, so as her second one being the Kamehameha. She is very mobile and quick to reach the boss. How to play her? Soulfist is a back attack class. The good thing is that you have a skill that is 3 dashes and 1 button. To play her, you must wait for your gauge to go up, which goes up fairly fast, then just burst the fuck out the boss. Her first build allows her to build up her gauge, then use it all by bursting your skills, giving you a ton of burst damage. I think this class is the second highest burst damage, first being the Sorceress. Her second build is a consistent damage build, where you consistently do damage and always have your gauge up. This build also stacks agility, so it makes her feel much faster than she already is. Next up is one of my favorite classes, Gunslinger. Gunslinger is a class that has 3 weapons, shotgun, pistol, and sniper. She plays a melee and long range role. She is a female version of the Deadeye, and honestly it just feels much nicer than the Deadeye. How to play? To play this class, you must rotate between your 3 weapons to do damage. You always want to use your sniper skills on cooldown, then shotgun, then when your skills are on cooldown, you zoom around spamming your pistol skills. Her first build, which is Peacemaker, which is the meta build, gives her a buff depending on which weapon she is wielding. Pistol gives attack speed, shotgun gives crit chance, and sniper gives extra damage. Her second build is Hunting Time, locking out her shotgun skills, so she only has a pistol and sniper. This class is agility based, so your sniper shot and mobility is much faster, so is your sniper skills being much lower on the cooldowns. Your sniper skills do much more damage since it'll compensate for you not having your shotguns. Next up is Artillerist. This class is super tanky with a massive gun that allows you to shoot nukes from the sky. You get a shield that grants immunity to knockback, which is so fun because you can just tank all the boss's skills. Now how to play. To play this class, you have a gauge to build up that allows you to do more crit chance, which is basically a damage increase, and you just burst out a bunch of nukes and rockets that are all critting. And you can enter your gauge form to enter a stationary turret, which is only recommended when your skills are on full cooldown. It is best to stay in human form and just keep launching those rockets and nukes. His first build is what I basically explained earlier, giving you crit chance when the higher the gauge. This is considered the meta build since everyone uses it. Something I forgot to say is that it also gives you 30% reduced damage taken, super tanky. His second build allows you to do more damage in your turrets, but nobody uses this engraving because it's just not that good. Not because of your damage, but actually pulling off the damage off of being stationary is very difficult and sometimes impossible. Deadeye. This class is a male version of the Gunslinger. His main weapon is a shotgun, allowing you to do an insane amount of damage with your shotguns. The class also looks badass with his skills. Now how do you play? To play this class, you have to back attack all of his shotgun skills. When your skills are on cooldown, you use your sniper on the long range, which doesn't do much damage. Keep in mind this is also back attack. Deadeye's first build is enhanced weapon, giving you 20% extra crit chance just at level 1, which is what most people rock. His second build is very unique. It's called Handgunner, and basically both your sniper and shotgun skills get locked out and you spam your pistol skills. This build got recently heavy buffed, but it's still not really that strong. It is now viable though and super fun to use. Sharpshooter. This class is a male bow class. He has a pet hawk that also does damage with him. This class's skill animations are really sick and is basically your average bow class on every MMO. How do you play? To play this class, you're essentially using your bow to deal a ton of free damage in the long range. The reason I say it's free is because of how easy this class really is. Super fun and cozy. You also command your hawk to go in and deal damage. His first build is Death Ray. Your bird returns you 50% of your gauge and gives you a whopping 40% damage buff. Very nice and solid. His second build is called Second Companion. A build that stacks agility, makes Hawkeye much faster, especially with all of his charging skills. Now Bard. This is the second and last support that we will be talking about in this video. The Bard is a healer that has a harp as her weapon. She does 0 damage, but gives her teammates an insane amount of healing, and very good buffs. If you don't want to die, always take a Bard in your team. Now how do you play? To play the Bard, you must use gauge skills, meaning skills that increase your gauge, and then use your heals on the ground that your teammates can step on. You're essentially a support class that everyone loves having. Her first build, which is a build that 99% of players use, is her Urgent Rescue build, allowing her to drop a pool of heals that teammates can use. Most of the time, the players will get at least 50% of their health back in return. You also have the option to lose out on the heal and instead give a big damage buff. Second build, which I won't talk about much, is her DPS build, which isn't good at all. Gives her buffs and just makes her kinda useless. Next up is Sorceress. Sorceress is a very new class that replaced Summoner's spawn in A. This class is your mage class. She summons meteors, lightning, and fireballs from her wand, dealing an insane amount of damage. That's if you land her skills. Now how do you play? To play this class, you must fill up your gauge to max. Then once you use your 3 main damage skills to burst out damage, this class is the highest burst in the game. Her first build, which is Ignition, is what I basically explained. Max your gauge out, then once used, you burst out all of your skills. The gauge usually only lasts for one rotation, hence why it's so strong and difficult to play. Her second build is Reflex. She has no gauge for burst but can instead have much more mobility, giving her a move that allows her to teleport around. Reflex build is much faster on speed and skill cooldown since you stack agility. Very flashy as well. Deathblade. This class is a assassin. She has 2 katanas and is super flashy. She's considered an extremely high damage dealer, especially with her new burst build. How do you play? To play this class, you have to back attack. The good thing is, you have a skill that jumps over the boss. Very useful for a class that back attacks. She has a gauge form. When filled up, she gets attack speed, movement speed, damage increase, and a burst skill that does a ton of damage and has pretty good range. Her first build, which is consistent damage, is Dancing Explosion. She basically does consistent damage behind the boss, then leashes out with her identity skill. Her second build is the Burst Blade, allowing her to stack up to 20 bars of her identity. Once you have 20 bars, you use your identity skill, which does an absurd amount of damage. This class's burst lives up to its name for sure. Keep in mind though, you miss one burst, your damage goes down to the drain. Very difficult class. Last but not least, the Shadowhunter. This is by far the cheapest DPS class to play. She is a demonic class which turns her into a demon when in gauge form. How do you play? To play her, when in human form you must increase your gauge, and at max, you leash yourself as a demon and spam your skills. Once you're out of demon form, you rinse and repeat. Her first build is basically what I just explained. To be more elaborate, she has a really high mobility on her demon form, really low cooldowns, and she's extremely fast. You also get a heal every time you enter demon form. Her second build is a human form build, so your demonic form is useless. So the human form build gives your human form skills a ton of damage increase, which I think is really cool because I personally love the human form skills. Also, the human form build has higher damage potential.